Welcome back to Indomitable Interactive's Indie Highlight. Today I'm talking about a game called Infernax. Made by Berserk Studio, Infernax is an action platforming metroidvania in which you play as a knight banishing demonic evil from the land. I'll preface this review by saying that I played through this game a while ago and only played a bit recently to grab some footage for this very video. However, I thought this game was great and deserved some more attention, so I wanted to make this video nonetheless. This game falls into a special category for me of modernized NES games that I absolutely love. For example, Axiom Verge is heavily inspired by Metroid. The Messenger feels like a modernized version of Ninja Gaiden, and Gravity Circuit felt heavily inspired by the Mega Man franchise. In this case, Infernax seems to be a modernized version of Castlevania 2 or Phazanadu, or Faxanadu, never really known, but both were great in their time. They're still great games now, like Ninja Gaiden for example, but all have dated things that games like Infernax and The Messenger respectively can do better. For example, climbing on walls in Ninja Gaiden was always a bit clunky, but The Messenger took the same mechanic and made it work perfectly. Infernax has improved on the clunky controls of the early Castlevania installments, but not as much as they could have. One thing you'll notice is that you cannot control the height of your jump based on how long you hold the jump button, i.e. tapping the jump button and holding it both result in jumping at your character's maximum height. This seems like a pretty simple oversight to me, but nonetheless a mechanic that makes platformers much more enjoyable in my opinion. Thankfully, you can still move back and forth in midair, unlike Castlevania. These little things do lend well to making it feel like an NES game, so overall I still think the movement and platforming works pretty well for this game. One of the most interesting aspects of the game is its morality system. With Infernax, choices matter. They affect your morality, which can change what ending you get. There are many endings that can be triggered by doing specific things, and the timing of you being good or evil. There are, of course, endings for being good all the way through, and evil all the way through, but there is also an ending for switching from evil to good, and doing specific things while being good, versus doing the same thing but being evil. There are also silly endings like getting back on the boat at the beginning of the game, or going to sleep in an inn 5 times in a row. There is a much larger pool of endings than I previously thought when I originally played the game. This fits well with the game's level up system, which allows you to somewhat customize your character's strengths. Killing enemies gives you XP, which you can spend to increase your level in power, health, or mana. You can upgrade your mace, and your playstyle also adapts based on what spells you're able to find. This combined with the story's flexibility through the morality system allows for a pretty customizable playthrough. This makes each playthrough a unique experience and adds a significant amount of replayability to the game. On top of the morality system, the game's story is good as well. Although it is a fairly simple tale of banishing demonic evil, the in-game events and quests force you to make tough decisions that are genuinely intriguing and again change the outcome of the game. You'll often find that going with the evil option in a given event is easier than being good, showing how susceptible you are to the evils of this world. However, being evil will give you a bad ending. It may even make you feel bad as a person. The dialogue is good as well, going above and beyond the standard with interesting lines like, "The prayers quell the pain of battle." Epic fantasy lines like that lend well to the dark theme of the game. The story can certainly be dark at times, but it fits with the gory visuals. Infernax's art is quite good and again very gory, which is fairly cool so long as you're not squeamish. I do not love it just for its gore or anything, but I have to appreciate the enemy designs and especially the boss designs, as they are quite unique, creepy, and sometimes genuinely horrifying, which adds to the thrill of fighting them. The environment art is nothing to scoff at either, but it does not stand out to me as much as the boss designs. To go along with the art, this game's music is also pretty good. I always mention that I do not usually notice music in games that I play, and this game was really no different, but going back and listening to it more intently, it was certainly good and most importantly, fitting. One thing I am yet to mention is how hard this game is. I found Infernax exceedingly difficult, which can be hard to do in a fun way. I would say that overall, this game is able to be hard and fun at the same time, but in some ways it can still be annoying. The difficulty isn't usually unfair, but it does punish impatience quite a lot. I like to move through games as quickly as possible, so this was certainly something I had to adapt to. The combat itself is oftentimes swinging your mace over and over, especially in the early game, which can become boring fairly quickly. Although the mace in Infernax feels pretty good to swing, rooms full of enemies can sometimes feel daunting. Because of this relatively simple combat system, before getting a plethora of spells at least, you need to have enemies that die fairly quickly. Killing bad guys feels good, and so does progressing the game. Enemies being sponges is tiring and makes you feel powerless. The majority of the enemies in the overworld do not feel this way, but there are certainly exceptions. These enemies take far too long to kill, and because enemies respawn if you simply leave the screen and return, you can find yourself spending simply too much time fighting off enemies in repetition, especially in dungeons. Because of this, progressing can become very repetitive and tiring in certain areas, which is why I say that impatience is punished. This, however, is in fact how many retro games are, and probably not as annoying for any gamers that are more patient than myself. If you simply accept that fighting in some areas will be somewhat of a time sink, then it really is not bad at all. With all that in mind, I certainly still think that while the combat is definitely imperfect, it is more than good enough to still be worth playing through the game, especially for its other aspects that it does very well. For that reason, I give it an 8 out of 10. While the combat is somewhat flawed, the game nails its design in essentially every other department. It can certainly be frustrating at times, but it is also rewarding, and the morality system introduces a very intriguing aspect to the game's story. If you like retro games like Castlevania 1, 2, or 3, or you like Vaxanadu or Fazanadu, or even Legend of Zelda 2, Adventure of Link, I think this game expertly modernizes and expands upon them, and for that I certainly think it is worth checking out, especially on sale. Steam page and dev socials are linked in the description as always, and thanks for watching.